Greetings everyone and welcome to Knowledge Creation Workshop Series. I am your host, Araba Soon, also known as Yolanda Manning, and I will be leading you through a conversation and a demonstration on health, wellness, nutrition, and healing. We're out at Knowledge Quest's Greenleaf Learning Farm, so we're switching things up a little bit. We're out in nature. We have an audience that's out here as well that are social distancing, has their mask on, and we're going to have a great time today. All right, so the conversation that we're going to have today is going to be specifically about Food Scraps 101 and how to compost properly. Then we're going to go into a demonstration where I'm going to show you all how to prepare spring. They're known as spring rolls, but I'm going to call mine summer rolls because we're specifically using summer produce. So if you've eaten at any Vietnamese or Chinese restaurants, then you may have had something called a spring roll that comes with like rice noodles, cabbage, carrots, cucumbers, peppers. So we're going to remake our own with locally sourced produce, and we have some of that from the Greenleaf Learning Farm as well as from some farmers markets throughout the city. So Food Scraps 101. I want to ask you all, what do you all do with your food scraps? So when you have produce that you prepare, if you're making a salad or you're cooking some greens and you're taking the stems, what do you do with them? Do you throw them away? Do you repurpose them? Or do you freeze them to compost them? You what now? You throw them away. Someone says they throw them away. No worries there. We're going to learn a little bit about that though. Anyone else? Does anyone repurpose theirs? Yes. Dig a hole in the backyard and throw it in. Awesome. I love the answer, Bianca. So that is also known as composting. So with food scraps, I want to teach you all how to reimagine them. There's so many different things that you can do with food scraps, because as we know, a lot of produce, you don't use like the core of an apple, or you don't use the stems of greens, but there's so many different things that you can do with it, okay? So first and foremost, the tip that I want to give you all is to use as much of the produce, the greens, the fruit, veggies as possible. And what I mean by that, if you're cutting a cabbage, try to just cut out the core and leave the rest of the cabbage present. If you're eating an apple, eat it all the way down to the middle where you only have seeds left, and then just the very core part, okay? So that's the first tip on how to repurpose and utilize all of your food scraps there, okay? Second point is that you can use them as veggie broth. So how many of us buy veggie broth packaged in the stores? Anybody buy veggie broth packaged? No? Okay, I definitely do. So another thing you can do with your food scraps is you basically take whatever you have left over from broccoli, onions, carrots, celery, even mushrooms, as well as the garlic peels. You take those and you just put them in the freezer, and what you can do when you're ready, you will take those out and you add several cups of water to it, add them to a pot, and then you're going to boil it. You're going to boil that for about an hour. So what that's going to do is going to extract all of the nutrients and all of the flavor from those fruits and vegetables, and then you're going to drain it, and then you have vegetable broth. It's just that easy. So sometimes when we purchase vegetable broth, that can cost us anywhere from $2 to $4 per carton, versus just making your own is cheap, convenient, and you're able to utilize the entire produce as far as your food scraps are concerned, okay? And you can season that too. I wanted to share that. So you can add bay leaves to that if you want to. You can add herbs, seasoning, salt to really make it your own, all right? That's going to save you a lot of money, a lot of time, and it's going to be definitely much healthier for you versus buying it packaged or processed, okay? And the second point that I want to say is that how many of us eat the greens off of our carrots? Anybody? No. Okay, so no one eats the greens off of the carrots. Well, has anyone had pesto before? Okay, do you all like pesto? Pesto is typically made with herbs such as parsley, but what you can do is you can make pesto out of those carrot green tops. So you can mix that with some oil as well as some different seasonings, and then you can just blend that up really fine until you get the taste and the texture that you desire. And you can have that on pizza, you can have that with pasta, you can also enjoy that on a piece of toast or even with crackers or such. So whatever you would like to enjoy that with there. And the next point is going to be your stem. So I talked a little bit about this with the greens. So sometimes we make collard greens, we make turnip greens, and we typically just use the green part and we just throw away the stems or we throw away the root of it. But what I want to encourage you all to do is you can chop those up very fine, store them, or you can always saute those with a little sea salt, some soy sauce, or even onion powder and garlic powder. Saute that up really well, and you can enjoy that as well for any type of lunch or dinner or things like that. All right, and then one last point, second to last point I want to make before I get into composting is going to be juicing. How many of us juice or make smoothies? Awesome. So as we know, smoothies is pretty much you're adding everything to the blender and you're just blending it up, maybe with some ice, some juice, some fruit, and you're going to have the fiber and everything intact in that, right? It's much thicker. But when it comes to juices, you're going to extract the juice, you're going to extract the fiber from the actual fruit, and that's going to just give you a liquid form. And so sometimes if you juice, you have a whole lot of peelings and fiber left over. Instead of just throwing that out, you can bake with it. You can add it to some muffins if you're making some type of fruit muffins. You can add it to pancakes, and you can even add it to some type of a bread that you're making, okay? And so that's a different way to make sure that you're utilizing those food scraps when it comes to your fruit. All right, the last point that I want to make is about composting. Anyone familiar with composting, and anyone actually composts at their house? Yes? Alita? Awesome. Okay, sweet deal. 1 second, you all. I gotta give me a drink of water. As we know, as I'm talking right now, I feel like I'm burning calories. Honestly, it's super hot out here, but we're making it happen. All right, composting. You may be asking, okay, what is that? Why is it so important? I mean, it's just food scraps. Let me just throw it in the trash with all the other plastic and paper and things like that that I already, take out to the curb for the garbage man to come to get, right? Or the garbage woman, right? So the thing about composting, why it's so important, is that you're basically taking old food scraps and you're just giving it back to what I like to call Mother Earth. And so that's just the land that you see around you. You're basically saying, okay, instead of throwing this in a garbage can, I'm going to throw this back into the earth so it can repurpose itself, and so it can also create more nutrients, more value to the land that we already live, okay? If you don't know much about composting, if you just throw it in the trash like most of us do, there's no judgment there, but I would encourage you all to just try to do things a little bit different when you are preparing these foods, so that you're able to give back to our earth, right? And so the few things about composting that I want to talk about is the do's and don'ts, right? So first and foremost, the things that you should compost and that you should focus on. Compost is made of two different materials, right? So you have your green material and then you have your brown material. Your green material is going to be everything from your leafy greens, your produce, so that's all the different hues of produce types. So that's colorful peppers, oranges, bananas, anything you name as far as produce is concerned, it can go in that pile. There's going to be grass clippings, it's going to be gardening clippings, as well as, again, any type of fruit that you want to add in there as well. Then you have your brown materials. That's going to look like everything from straw to hay, brown paper bags. So sometimes when we go to the grocery store, if you go to Kroger, you can get a brown bag instead of a plastic bag. And what you can do with that brown bag is you can add it to your compost as well. Other things looks like nutshells. If we have any coffee drinkers out here, the actual ground that you use, as well as the filters, that can also go in your compost bin. And so what you want to do is get you a bucket. This can look like a painter's bucket. It can honestly just look like a pile, I guess a section in your backyard that you're just adding things to. And so over time, what it's going to do is going to break down. And then it's eventually going to become what we know as soil, okay? And so some don'ts when it comes to composting is going to look like anything from meat, grease, bones, and dairy, right? So anything that's eggs, butter, cheese, you don't want to add any of that to your compost, because what that's going to do is going to create a foul odor, and then it's also going to attract pests in the form of rats, raccoons, as well as dogs sometimes too. So you don't want that infestation in your backyard when it comes to that. Some other don'ts that you want to focus on when composting are weeds. When you are doing brown paper bags, making sure it doesn't have a glossy texture. You don't want to add that in because it's been chemically processed, so you want to avoid that as much as possible. And you also want to avoid, I think I may have said this, but weeds as well as plants that have been sprayed with pesticides. So more genetically modified plants and produce, you want to avoid those as well. And so when you're thinking of this compost rule, you want to make sure you focus on your green materials as well as your brown materials. And then you want to make sure you focus on a formula of 50% each. So it's going to be 50% green and 50% brown. And what you want to do is just mix that up. If you have an actual section in your backyard, you're just going to take some type of, it can be a shovel where you're just, you're going to kind of mix it. So flip it every now and then so that it breaks down evenly. If you have an actual bucket, you can mix that in with some type of stick or something that's just going to be sturdy enough to move those things around, okay? And if you're familiar with the Greenleaf Learning Farm, if you're familiar with any other farms or gardens in your area, you could always just drop it off to them. They would love you for it because that's basically like, I like to call it liquid gold or even black gold when it comes to farming or gardening, because it's really just going to enhance whatever produce and whatever types of flowers and things that they're growing in their backyard or their farm, okay? So that's a little bit about Food Scraps 101 and composting. I don't want to continue on because I could pretty much talk about this for a long time, so I'm going to dive into our summer rolls session and then we'll go from there.
Good deal. Sweet. So now that we got the conversation out the way in regards to health and healing, now we're going to dive into a food demonstration. So what I like to do is I like to specifically use produce from the farm. So that looks like everything from whatever's in season. So right now I have some carrots, cabbage, cucumbers, and some spring onions. We're going to add some rice noodles to that as well. We're going to mix that up, season it up really well, and I'm going to show you all how to make a spring summer roll wrap, okay, by using rice paper. All right, so I'll show you the first ingredients that we're going to use, the seasonings, and then we'll get started. All right, so as mentioned, I like to focus on things that are locally sourced and within, I would say, 150 miles of Memphis. And then I also like to focus on fresh, just specifically fresh produce, as well as things that we can just recreate ourselves. So I also like to focus in on affordability, convenience, and nutritious. That's my kind of motto when it comes to healthy living as well as preparing fresh food. And so, as I mentioned, we're going to start off with some green onions. I'm going to do maybe just 2 stalks of these starting off. Spring onions is a good one because it's not as strong as like red onions or yellow onions. So we're going to start with those, cutting those up. I have, I would say this is probably like 1/4 of a cabbage because I have prepared some already that I'll have samples for the audience that are here today. So this is the cabbage. When I mentioned utilizing the entire cabbage, I took off a couple of leaves of the first 2 leaves of it just because they were kind of damaged, and when I cleaned it, it just wasn't, it still had some, I would say some different, it was just damaged. So I just took that part off, right? So then I took the core out of it as well, but again, I tried to get as close to the cabbage as I possibly could so that we could utilize that entire part. I have the rice noodles that I have already cooked. So these are technically not raw because it has been cooked for 8 minutes. However, the majority of the meal is raw, with, I would say, 15% of it being non-raw. I have a cucumber that is from the garden. This is a huge one. So there's 2 types of cucumbers. You have a pickling cucumber, and then you have this one, which is a larger size. I would say I prefer the pickling cucumbers because they have more flavor to me, and they're also much smaller, so they're easier to manage when you're processing them. The larger ones taste majority like water to me, so you have to really go in on the seasonings to make it taste very, I guess, savory if you're trying to create that type of dish. I have a carrot here that I've already cut in half, and I've also started to cut away at it a little bit just to show you that, and then we're going to process that here shortly. And I have a lime that I want to season this with, as well as an avocado that I'm going to add last, because if you all know me, you know that I always have avocados with every meal. It's your healthy fats that you truly need. All right, and so these are the seasonings. So I'm going to add a little olive oil here. I have some reduced sodium tamari, which is also known as soy sauce. The difference between these is that this one specifically has lower sodium, but also it's gluten-free compared to any other soy sauces. I have some garlic, so I always try to take the convenient way out when it comes to processing garlic. So this is an organic version that is in olive oil. I have something called rice seasoning, also known as furikake. That's the name of it. And so this is kind of like if you've had seaweed before or sesame seeds. This is pretty much just a mixture of seasonings that I'm going to add to our spring mix today. I have a little sea salt that I'm going to add in there. And then for my people who love spice, I got some chili garlic sauce that I'll just add a little bit to individually if you prefer that. And again, this is the rice paper. So when you get those spring rolls at the Vietnamese restaurants, this is how it starts off. It starts off as a very, I would say, thick paper-like wrap. And so it looks just like this when you're processing it, right? And so what we're gonna do is add water to this bowl, leave it in the water for maybe 10 to 15 seconds. It's gonna break down as that wrap that you're known to have once you get it from the restaurant. And then we're gonna roll it up really quickly, because what happens is the rice paper pretty much sticks to whatever it is that you're processing it on. So if I add it to a paper towel, that paper towel and that rice paper is now going to be one. Okay, so you have to move really quickly when you're processing that. I'm going to grab my peeler and then we can dive right in. And let me know if you all can see everything okay. I can move some things around. Alright, so starting off with my onions, because it's the easiest thing to begin with. I have my knife here and I'm just going to chop up a few of these. So I like to use the entire onion. The bottom part is known as the spring onion, also known as green onions. And then the top, sometimes we refer to that as chives. And I just like to, again, not waste any type of part of the produce, so we're going to use majority of this today. I was just praising that there was no bugs out here, but I realized it was only because I didn't have any food out. So if you see me swaying, that's exactly what it is. Alright, so I have my onions cut up. For this, you don't have to use spring onions. You can use red onions, yellow onions, white onions if you prefer that. Again, I like the spring onions because it does add just a lighter onion taste. It's not as strong as our other onions that we're known to enjoy. Next, I'm going to start with our purple cabbage. Your cabbage doesn't have to be purple. It can be a green cabbage as well.
Is there a difference in taste in the red cabbage and regular cabbage?
That's a great question. So I would definitely say the purple cabbage has more flavor compared to your green cabbage. And that's pretty much with most things, right? So your colorful peppers, the orange ones, the red ones are going to be more flavorful than the green ones. So I'm going to chop that down, and then I'm going to chop it long ways too to get a smaller chop. Alright, and I'm going to go ahead and add this to my bowl here. Alright, so we have our onions and our cabbage added in there. I'm going to switch out my cutting boards because that one is a bit small. Alright, next up is going to be our cucumbers. I'm going to peel the cucumber peel off. Typically I would eat it, but sometimes it has a very bitter taste and it can kind of overpower the salad. So feel free to leave that on if you like. I'm going to remove it today. But I am going to keep these peelings. For one, either composting it or adding it to a vegetable broth, as I shared earlier. And so there's a couple of ways that you can process this. You can just cut them like rings here and cut them 4 ways so you can get more of a small chop here. You could also julienne them, which takes a little bit more time. I'm going to go ahead and just chop them small, and I'm also going to leave the seeds. Some people don't prefer the seeds, they want to take them out, so when they julienne them, they pretty much remove all the seeds and they just have strips of cucumbers. I like to, again, utilize all of it because it's super important that we eat the entire part of the produce that we have. And as we should know, the seeds have a lot of flavor and a lot of nutrients as well.
What does julienne them mean?
What does julienne mean? Julienne is a form of cutting. So you have chopping, you have mincing, and I can show you what a julienne cut is. I can show you better than I can tell you. Yes. And so I'm going to show you all how to julienne right quick. All right, so this is the part that I just removed the seeds, and this is just the end part of the cucumber. So julienne is basically just cutting into strips or spirals, depending if you're making greens. So this is kind of like a julienne cut here, and it could be smaller than this, it could be larger. So, and I'm going to chop this up a little bit more just to keep it consistent with our sharing today. So that is julienne. It's just a type of cut that is more of a Latasha, you got me here. More strips, I would say, and spirals. Yes. Okay. Thank you for challenging me there. I needed that. All right, so we're going to add in the rest of this to our mix. What's for dinner tonight? Anyone have any plans already? Any leftovers? Huh? Okay, so leftovers? I got you. You got some greens in there too? No? Okay. No judgment. But I am going to challenge you all to eat more greens. It's important. So our cut here is a little bit different, but we're going to just roll with it. Alright, so I'm adding those in here. And based off of the recipe, so someone may be asking, well, how much do I put in? How much cabbage? How much spring onions, cucumbers? If you all know me, especially via FB Live, then you know that I don't really measure anything. I just go off of what I feel and most importantly, what I have on hand, right? That's the most important part, because if you're following a recipe, let's say you have all the ingredients, but you don't have just one item. Are you going to just do away with the recipe because you don't have one item? No, you're going to continue to prepare it and put your own touch on it and your own feel on it to make it your dish, okay? That's the most important part to preparing your foods. All right, so now we have some carrots here, and I'm just going to shred these just a tiny bit, just so we can get some color and some flavor of carrots in here. And these carrots can be a little bit trickier. I tried to find the largest ones because I knew that I would be doing this to it. If you get small ones, this would be like a joke kinda, because you probably only get just a little bit of peelings from it. And as you can see, it's getting harder to kind of maneuver as I'm cutting it, but you just kind of have to move around and make it work for you. And if you wanted to, you could just chop them, but what it's going to do is going to be a lot thicker, and it's going to be harder to eat in something like a salad. And I personally don't care for thicker carrots. I like my carrots to be thinly sliced. And I'm going to do one more of the carrots there to really get some more color and flavor in there. So this one I didn't actually peel it yet, so the first layer of skin, you definitely want to take that off. You don't want to consume that, so take that first layer off. I can also see that the sky gods are on our side because it really got shady out here. So that's awesome.
Hopefully no rain.
Oh yeah, let's hope not. It will be refreshing though. So I'm going to just continue to do this here. And it's great to have gloves on. One, when I'm preparing for other people, that's important, but also because the orange is starting to get on my fingers a little bit, so it'll pretty much dye your hands if you're doing it just barehanded. And as I mentioned, you can use whichever types of produce you like. I had some green peppers and red peppers that I could have added to this as well. If you have broccoli on hand, you could always add that too. You may want to just cut it to a thinner cut to make sure that it mixes well. So I'm going to mix this up with my hands here. And the last thing we're going to add in is our rice noodles. So these rice noodles, I bought them at the Vietnamese store on Cleveland, also known as Viet Ho. But you could also purchase these at Kroger. It's just going to be a different variety. And you could just use with whatever noodle you like to use, okay? And so I cooked them on high for 8 minutes. And what you want to do is just take them off the pot and make sure you give it a really, really quick, cool bath. And so what that's going to do is going to slow down the cooking process, because I don't know if you all have ever had noodles that were just overcooked and it created a mush. That just means that they weren't al dente, which means that it wasn't cooked to perfection right before. You basically want to take it off the pot before it's even done, because it's going to continue to cook anyway, right? And so these are longer. I haven't cut them yet. And so since we're doing this as a, oh, the disrespect. Since we're doing this as a spring mix, we want to keep these noodles small as possible. So I'm going to just chop these up just a little bit, kind of like our cabbage, to where the noodles are shorter in size. I'm going to add this to our mix. And now I'm going to mix this around. So the noodles serve as a filler for this dish. You don't have to add it in if you don't like. Since we're making the spring rolls, it's really going to be an extra additive to this to make it more heartier. Because the rice noodles and the rice paper are pretty much the same thing. They're just processed differently. It's just essentially rice, water, and salt. Alright, so I have this mixed up really well. See if you all can see this. Can everyone see it? Yeah, okay. And so now this is when we're going to start to season, okay? I'm going to try to fight off these flies as I'm doing this. So I'm going to start off with the olive oil. You could also use sesame oil if you have that, grapeseed oil. Since this is raw, you can pretty much use any oil because we're not going to be cooking this. And this is about a teaspoon I'm going to add in. I'm going to go light on the oil starting off, because you can always add in more, versus you can't reverse how much you put in, so you want to start off with as minimal as possible. Alright, so I have that added in. Now I'm going to add in about, I'm going to say 2 teaspoons of the tamari seasoning, which is also known as soy sauce. So if you have that on hand, that'll work just fine. A little bit typically goes a long way, but this salad is water-based, so you want to keep that in mind, meaning you have a lot of things in here that has water, so the content of water is going to be higher, so your seasoning game needs to be stronger when you're doing that, to make sure that it has flavor to it. You don't want it to taste bland. Alright. Next up is going to be some garlic. And I'm going to do roughly a teaspoon of this as well. I'm going to mix that in and making sure that it's even all around. Alright, next up is going to be our rice seasoning, also known as furikake, which is a very interesting name. So I'm just going to season this to the entire top is full. So that's going to be roughly 2 to 3 teaspoons. And again, this is nori sheets, also known as seaweed, sesame seeds. It has a little salt in there, and it also has some sugar. Alright, I'm going to mix this up some more. Oh man, they've called a gang of flies out here, y'all. They called their whole family. All right. So this part, what I would suggest that you do is try it, right? It's really important to try your recipes as you're creating them, because no one just adds a bunch of things in and just hopes for the best. And if you cook like that, you know, continue to do that if it works for you. However, you know, you want to try it as you go. Okay, so I'm going to taste this on camera. I want to see if I can cover up our stuff right quick. This is getting out of hand. All right. And I assume that it's going to need some more seasoning because this was a nice sized batch. So it definitely needs more seasoning. I'm going to add some more to that. Alright, so I'm going to start off by adding in some salt, because that's one thing that we haven't added in yet by itself. So I have some Himalayan salt present. You could also use sea salt if you have that. And that's going to add some more flavor to it. Alright, now I'm going to mix this in some more. And while I'm at it, I'm going to add a little more of the soy sauce, tamari sauce. And the stirring is really important because all of the juices and the seasonings go to the bottom. So you're going to make sure you mix all of that around. Alright, so I'm going to give this a good cover, and then I'm going to show you all how to actually prepare the rice roll. Are y'all still with me? Okay. Are y'all looking up some recipes for tonight? No? Okay. Or are you trying to see if I'm doing this right? Yeah? Okay. So with rice rolls, you could enjoy them, if you season them really well, you can enjoy them that way, or you could also have it with sriracha sauce, which is that more spicy flavor, or you could do peanut sauce too. It depends on what your preference is. Alright, so I'm going to show you all how to do this really quickly. So this is my bowl here. I chose a flatter bowl because we're going to need to put the actual rice paper inside there. And then I have a gallon, I'd say about a half a gallon of water here. So I'm going to add this water in first. And then I'm going to take this rice paper and I'm just going to stick it in. I would say 10 to 15 seconds. Definitely want to make it quick, because if you leave it in a long time, again, it's going to become one with the bowl. So you don't want that to happen. But it's just enough to get it drenched in the water. The paper, it's made of rice. So it's just rice, water, tapioca flour, and salt. Alright, so I'm going to take this out, and as you can see, the texture has changed. It's become a lot flimsier. It's going to continue to change. That's why you really have to move quickly. So I'm going to grab roughly a handful of the rice, of the mixture. Alright, and I'm going to add a little bit more there. I'm going to also add some more of the rice seasoning. And you're gonna pull in both sides of the rice roll. So you're gonna fold it in, kind of like a burrito, and then you're gonna start to tuck and roll. And as you're rolling, you wanna pull in the veggies close to you so that you can get all of the produce or all of the mixture in the wrap, okay? Uh-oh, so this is a trial one. It's giving me a time here. Okay. And sometimes if you add a little bit too much of the wrap, it can start to overfilled. And I'm gonna do another one just so I can do less of the wrap, less of the mixture. Also probably shouldn't do it on that parchment paper. I'm gonna do it just on the cutting board this time. So perhaps it won't stick to the paper then. Alright, so I'm gonna roll those sides in, tuck and roll. Alright, so this one is much better. So these are best enjoyed when you prepare them on site. If you try to prepare these ahead of time and then have them for the next day, again, it's going to pretty much stick together unless you put something in between them so they can stay separate. It's going to, you get better with time too when you continue to roll them. And again, you can enjoy these with the sriracha seasoning. You can enjoy them with the peanut sauce. It just depends on how you prefer it there. And the rice paper is just optional. It's nothing you have to have because it's pretty much the rice pasta or the noodles that you already have in the mixture. It's just creating more of a hold for your salad, I would say. So I'm going to end here because these flies are giving me the time of day. Okay, so we're going to end this session here, and then we'll I'll further continue to talk to my audience that's here with me. Thank you all for joining, and I'll see you next Thursday at 3 p.m. Thank you.